Hi everyone, today I'll be walking you through the different account management features available at Decisions. As you are administrating your environment, this will help you with the foundations of how accounts, groups, and permissions work together at Decisions. So let's go ahead. So this is the agenda of today's session. We'll be covering below topics. Firstly, creating an account. So for anyone, either a human or a machine to access Decisions environment needs to have authentication. And this is done via accounts. In addition to that, any changes that are done on the environment, for example, flows, rules, or reports, these changes are captured under audit trail linked to the account itself. It'll help us know who made these changes. And secondly, we'll look at password management. We'll see how users can change their password and how administrators can reset passwords. We'll also look at password policy and validations regarding how passwords can be set up. Next, we'll also briefly look at how an account can be disabled. For example, if someone leaves the company and you no longer need the account to be active, we can disable the access, and we'll also look at how the accounts can be deleted. Please keep in mind that disabling and deleting the account are two different actions on Decisions. Next, we'll be looking at guest accounts. So these are typically used in case of outside vendors. You don't want to create an account for them, so you go ahead and create a generic guest account, and we'll see how this can be set up. And then we'll also look at permissions, the different types of permissions available in Decisions and how to apply them. And next, name sessions. So this is another type of account in Decisions. We use name sessions when we want to invoke a workflow or rule through REST without exposing the user ID and password information. And this name session will allow us to create a GUID that can be tied up to a specific account. And now using this GUID, you can make the API call. And lastly, we'll also look at account impersonations. And these are used in conditions when users with limited access in the portal temporarily require access to additional functionality. For example, if my manager is on vacation and wants to delegate his assignments to me, I can set up account impersonation to replicate his account, and then I'll be able to access his accounts and complete them. So let's go ahead and look at each of the sections individually. Creating an account is very easy in Decisions. I'll show you how quickly we can create an account once we switch to the Decisions environment. When we are creating an account in Decisions, we are provided with many attributes and most of them are optional. Here you can see some of the attributes, and this additional information that we provide will be stored in a SQL or Postgres database and tied to the account. There are only two mandatory fields that needs to be entered while setting up an account, namely the email and the password. And the rest of the information are not necessary and can be used as per your company's policies. Let's switch to the Decision Studio. So here you can notice we are in the Decision Studio and I have logged in as an administrator. Let's navigate to the systems folder. Under that, security, and we are selecting the accounts. To create the account, we can click on this create account. Here you can notice the email and the password are the required fields that are highlighted in red. Let's enter some sample information. Password. As I scroll down, you can notice the many other attributes that are available, such as the employee ID, the first name, last name, middle name, the department, job title, manager, etc. So in case if the admin selects the manager, we have readily available steps in Decisions like fetching the manager information for a user that can be used in workflows. And we can also pick the location. So if your workforce is distributed across geographies, they work in different time zones and business hours, the same can be picked. We also have the option to select the language, time zone, and user culture. And these settings will affect how the end user portal is visible to the user. For instance, user culture will determine how the date, time stamp, and the currency, etc., looks to the user. And we also have the option to select the member of. And here you can see by default, there are 3 groups. We can create groups that will be looking at the later part of this session. By default, if there is no group selected, decisions will automatically allocate the user to the all users group. I'll go ahead and click on create account. So you can notice there's a new account created with the email that we have entered. Let's switch back to the slides and see the next part. Yeah. So we will talk about resetting the password from 3 different perspectives. Firstly, from an user perspective. So any user, in order to change their password, they can click on this little icon on the portal and select the action, change password, and update their new password details. And now from an admin perspective, so if admin wants to reset the password for any specific user, they can navigate to systems security, select the account that they want to reset the password, right click on it and choose this option. And thirdly, there could also be a scenario wherein an admin can lose their password and cannot log into the decisions environment. So if such a scenario arises, they can reach out to decisions support, and the support team will help in emergency password reset by running a query from backend on the SQL configuration database. And this is particularly useful if the administrator wants to reset their password after a malicious intrusion. Let's go ahead. And next, we'll also discuss about the account password policy. And using this password policy, we can set up validations for the password. So we can set up the upper and lower letter requirement, the number, the symbol requirements, and here you can also enable the account expiration. So you can set the number of days after which the user needs to update their password. You can also enable account lockout. That is, if a user enters an incorrect password for a specific number of times, then the account gets locked out. And using this option, you can forcibly close the user sessions whenever a password has been changed. And then we also have the option to not let the users use the last 4 used passwords. So let's switch to the studio and see how we can reset the password and also navigate to the account password policy section. So I'm switched to the Decision Studio. And now let's switch to the portal. So let's assume this is a user, and if they want to change their password, they can click on this icon and select the option change password. Here they can give their old password and the new password details and click on change password. And now let's see how this can be done from an administrative perspective. Let's switch to the studio. I've already logged in as an administrator. So admin can click on the settings button and then select the security option and then the account section. And now for any account that they want to reset the password, they can select it, right click on it and choose the option reset password. Let me give a password as and click on reset password. So in this way, administrators can quickly reset the password. And let's also look at account password policy. And this is available under the settings section. So we have to navigate to the portal settings. And here, let's scroll to the section called password. Yeah. So here you can see the section password settings. So we can configure the minimum password characters. And in case if we want the email for password reset, we can select the default or the empty template. Here you can see all the other different parameters like require upper, lowercase, symbols, numbers. And you can see as soon as I selected this enable account expiration, it's asking me for the number of days after which the password expires. Similarly, you can also configure the number of incorrect entries for the password. Here by default it's 3, and you can choose this forcibly close sessions and compare last 4 passwords, etc. So I'm not going to save this. Let me quickly close and cancel it. So let's switch back to the slides and continue with the next part. And disabling an account, for example, let's suppose an employee is taking a break for 3 months and you don't want to delete their account. So you have the option to disable it. And there are a couple of ways to do it. Let's switch to the studio again and see Anson how we can do that. So again, I'm navigating to the security path, selecting the accounts. Let's go back to the account that we have created. So if I have to deactivate it, I can right click on it, select the option manage, and then here you can notice there is an option called deactivate. So before I click on that deactivate, if you observe currently this this account is set for true for the is active field. So once I deactivate it, it will be set to false. That is, it is no longer active. I'll deactivate it. So you can notice it immediately changed to false status. And the another way to change the to activate or deactivate the account is by right clicking on it and selecting the option as edit account. So here, if you scroll down, you can notice there is a checkbox called is active. Since currently this account is in false state, we can see it's unchecked. So I can check or uncheck depending on whether I want to activate it or deactivate it. So let's leave this account as active. Also, let's make one quick change. Since this email is lengthy, let's trim this email and click on save. Okay, so let's go back to the slides again and continue. And next is account impersonations. So let's suppose there is a user that has limited access, but for a temporary period of time, you want to provide them additional functionality. So you can actually allow them to impersonate another account that has these permissions. So you can set up a time frame for which they can impersonate the account. And the major reason why it is used is, for example, if my colleague is on vacation, she can allow me to impersonate her account to work on her assignments. And now decisions audits who is making these changes to elements, workflows, rules, assignments, etc. So if I impersonate my colleague's assignments, so the status will be reflected as it is completed by Suresh as XYZ, if XYZ was the colleague's name. So let's go back to the studio and see how this account impersonations can be set up. So here again, we are back in the studio and there are a couple of ways to set up this account impersonation. So first, since we are logged in as an administrator, let's see how the admin can set up the impersonation. So before that, let's create one account for which we will be configuring the account impersonation. Let's go ahead, click on create an account. I'll name this as XYZ itself at decisions.com. and click on create account. So now if I have to configure the impersonation details for this XYZ account as an administrator, I can right click on this account, select the edit account option, scroll down. At the bottom, there should be a section for impersonation. Here you can see impersonation information, allowed impersonations list. So as an admin, I can select this add option and let's go ahead with the account that we have created at the start. And you also have the option to set the impersonation to expire after a specific time frame by selecting the start date and end date. You can select them if needed. And since this is a sample account, I'll let it to never expire and click on OK and save this. So this is one way in which an admin can configure the impersonation details. Let's look at another way in which the user, so the example that we have considered, if my colleague XYZ wants to configure the impersonation details, how she'll do it. So I'm switching out of the studio. I'm logging out, sorry. And I'm logging in as my colleague. Okay, so we have logged in as XYZ. You can notice XYZ, and XYZ has only access to the portal because by default we haven't selected any group, and it's all users, and all users don't have access to the studio. And now here you can notice there is an option called account impersonation. So I can click on this account impersonation. Here you can see there's already one account that has been added. We have just added it as an administrator. If I want to add further people who can impersonate my account, I can just click on this add and select the account name similar to what we have done in the administrator. I can also have I also have the option to delete this. So I'll close this and log out. So let's look at one more thing. So if I am logging in, let's see how I'll be able to impersonate and how the portal will look like. So I have logged in as myself, Suresh. So here you can see I have an option as login as. Since someone has enabled account impersonation for me, here this option is available. I'll select this login as, and here it's showing me the list of all the accounts that I can impersonate. So I'm just selecting one account and I'll click on impersonate. So as soon as I do this, here you can see there's a top bar that is showing that currently I am impersonating XYZ, and it's also showing me XYZ's home page. Now, if I make any changes on this portal, it will be stored in the database as changes made by Suresh at decisions.com as XYZ at decisions.com. Yeah. So let's switch back to the slides and continue with the next part. So name sessions. So when you're invoking the REST calls, instead of passing the username and the password in the body, you can pass in GUID. And this GUID will be tied to an account already existing in Decisions. A common use case can be, let's suppose there is an external program or a system that is making calls to the Decisions environment, and we're not concerned with who is making those calls. So in this case, we can create a generic account for this external system and then create a name session and tie up with this account. Let's switch to the studio and see how we can create the name session. So I'll log out as XYZ and log in as an admin. So we have to navigate to system security name sessions, and creating a name session is very easy. I can just click on this add name session and give it a name. Let's say Suresh test and tie up an account with this. I'll select my account itself. So as an admin, we have to ensure the account that we are selecting as the appropriate permissions for making this REST calls and accessing the necessary resources. I'll click on save. So to test this, let's quickly create a flow. I'll name this as name session test. Let's connect the start step with the end step so there are no validation errors. I'll click on this configure integration and select the API service for data format, maybe a JSON, and click on done and then view. So this should pop up a new window. Here you can notice we have the option to select the setup. Here, by default, the available name sessions are listed. I'll select this name session that we have created. So in this output, you can see how we can call this via the get, and we're passing the session ID. NS indicates name session and the GUID. And also same is the case for calling this method via post. You can see the session ID, etc. So let's close this window and close this flow as well and switch back to the slides. Next, we have guest accounts. And in simple terms, this is another way using which a non-portal user can access workflows or assignments that they need. And there are a couple of settings that needs to be enabled on Decisions platform. Let me show you what are those settings. So let's switch to the studio. I'm navigating to system and then selecting the settings. And then I should select the portal settings. Here, I'll search for guest account. In the search bar, here you can notice there's a checkbox which is disabled, unchecked. So I'll check this and click on save. Next, I need to navigate to the security folder and select the accounts. By default, the guest account is disabled. I can right click on it, choose manage, and then activate it. So this is how guest account can be configured so that the third-party vendors, etc., can access it without having any access to the portal. So let's switch back to the slides. So next, we'll be discussing about groups in decisions. In decisions, by default, there are 3 pre-configured groups. And the most important group is administrator. They have access to everything, the end user portal, designer studio, system folders, and they'll also be able to view elements that are hidden. So administrators are not logged out of anything. And the another group is all users. They have access only to the end user portal. And they also have access to the folders that are permission to be viewed on the user portal. And they can kickstart workflows and view the dashboards. And the third group is that of a designer. And designers have access to the designer studio along with the end user portal, but they have restricted access to the system folders. And obviously you can extend the permissions. In addition to this 3 default groups and decisions, we also allow you to create your own groups. For example, let's suppose there is an HR department. You can create a group for this function, add users to it, and provide permissions for the necessary folders, resources that they need access to. And you can also create groups for assignments as well. When you're assigning the assignments, you have the option to select both account as well as group. And you can apply permissions to different folders and decisions, again at group and account level. So let's switch to the studio and see how we can create a group. So here we are again in the decision studio. The path is system security, and then we'll click on groups. At the top, you can see there's an action button called create group. I'll click on this create group, and we ask the group name, which is a mandatory field. Let's take the same example. I'll go ahead and give it as HR department, and description as HR department functions. And now here you also have the option to pick a default folder. So that is when the users of this group log into decisions environment. So this is the folder that they'll be able to view. And then you also have the option to select the type of group, whether it's a local, remote, etc. And you also have the option to select default URL parameters. So in decisions, we can navigate to the environment using the URL parameters. I'll show you shortly one example of the same. So you can also specify the linked groups. As soon as I check this box, here there is an option to link a group. So let's say I'm adding a group, designers. So now by default, whenever a user is added to this HR department group, they'll also be added to the designers group. So this is helpful if there is a dependency between both departments and one department needs to have access to the other department. I'll save this. So here you can see there's a new group that's been created. And talking about the default URL parameters at the top, if you can notice, I am changing the URL to add Chrome is equal to off. So this will change the look and feel. That is the decisions branding is remote. So in this way, you can use those URL parameters to show how you want the end users or the designer studio to look for the groups. So before switching to the slides, we'll also look at how to add accounts to this groups. So here's the group that we have created. I can right click on it and select the option add remove accounts. Here I can mention the accounts. I'll click on add new and I can select the account. Let's say I'm going ahead and selecting this account and then click on add and okay. So this is one way of adding accounts to groups. There's also another way in which if you want to link the groups with the accounts. So these are the accounts. I can right click on any account. And then yes, there's an option called add remove groups. I can select that and it's showing currently the groups which XYZ is part of. I can click on add new and these are the other groups. So I can select the group and click on add. So there are a lot of different ways. Another way could also be I can right click the account, click on edit account. If I scroll down, there should be a section wherein it'll ask me about the group. You can see the select group. From here also I can add the accounts. And another feature that I wanted to explain is about this groups, add group subfolder. So if you have related groups and you want to create a folder under the group section, you can click on add group, give a name, and that will be available as a folder here, and you can start adding the groups to it. Let's go back to the slides. Next, we have permissioning. So permissioning in decisions is fairly easy and straightforward. We do offer the below type of permissions. We can get it granular level by picking and choosing this permissions. So we'll go through this permissions and the naming convention is itself self-explanatory. For example, you can use the can use permissions if you want the users to only use an entity and not open or view it. So you can use this level. And if you want them to open it, you can include the can open permission. Similarly, Can view will allow the user to view the folder in the folder tree. And when I'm talking about folder tree, it refers to the left side panel, the folder architecture in the decisions environment. You can use can edit that will allow the user to edit the entities within the folder. And can add will allow the users to add additional entities in the folder. For example, if a user is allowed permissions in a workflow folder without can add, the user will not be able to add any elements in that folder. Can delete will allow the users to delete the folder as well as the entities in it. Can administrate will allow the user to do all the admin activities like manage permissions, move the folder to different location, rename the folder, all these activities. And can see hidden will allow the user to view the hidden entities in the folder. For example, in decisions, when someone deletes a folder or an element, it is logically not deleted. It is just set to be hidden from the user visibility. So if we are enabling this can view the hidden, then the deleted files will also be visible. And if they are making the check to be visible on the portal. And can see archived will allow the users to view the archived folder. Similarly, can view browser page will allow the user to view the link of the browser page. Let's switch to the Decision Studio and see how this permissions can be applied. So I want to highlight a couple of pointers before we are looking at how to give this permissions. First is whenever we are applying permissions to a folder, for example, let's say if this is the project to which I'm allocating the permissions, if I'm right clicking on it and going to manage, I can assign the permissions. So by default, all the elements, the folders in this project, in this folder tree will be inheriting these permissions. And secondly, if if a user is part of two groups, then the user will inherit the permissions that has least restrictive access. To illustrate it further, let's say there is a user A who is part of administrator and designer. Then this user A will inherit the permissions of administrator because that has the least restrictive access. Let me show you how we can add the permissions. I can right click it, go to manage, and then click on manage permissions. And now here we can apply the permissions to both the accounts as well as groups. I can just click on add an account. Let me pick my account itself. And now you can see all the different permissions that we have discussed. I can select the necessary permissions, click on OK, and this account will be able to access this folder with the allotted permissions. Similar is the case with groups. I can click on add, select the group, and then whatever the permissions that I want to assign to this group, I can select them and click on OK and click on save. So in this way, permissions can be allotted to the users and groups. So this completes the account management. Thank you.